Vladimir Putin was greeted by Xi Jinping with full military honours as he arrived for a two-day state visit to Beijing.
Yes, this is their third meeting in just over a year. And comes less than a week after Russia launched a new offensive in northeastern Ukraine. Now, Russia and China's leaders say their deepening diplomatic relations are making the world a safer place. But how worried should the West really be seeing these images? Let's pose that question to senior consulting fellow at Chatham House, Keir Giles. Keir, watching the meeting between these two leaders, can't help but feel a little unsettled. What's your assessment here?
I think anybody that doesn't feel unsettled probably hasn't been paying attention, I'm sad to say. And that's not so much about this meeting, but it's about what it represents and the context it's happening in. You have an aggressive state that is waging a genocidal assault on the other end of Europe. And of course, it's backed by a coalition of other countries that are quite content to see this happen. Foremost among them, of course, China, which is fueling Russia's war machine and tolerating the disruption and damage that it's causing around the world. Meanwhile, of course, you've got the UK and other Western European countries belatedly realizing that their hollowed out armed forces and completely non-existent civil defense isn't really ready for the challenge when Russia has settled the situation in Ukraine to its satisfaction and moves on to its next target. So yes, unsettling, partly because it shows that China is still tolerating what Russia is doing and will still allow it to happen.
Keir, does this feed into what Rishi Sunak spoke about at the start of this week, this axis of evil between Russia, China, Iran and North Korea, all working together to destabilise the world?
Well, there are a lot of names that have been thrown at this coalition of countries that are currently happy to stand with Russia and are actually sending ammunition and supplies in so that it can launch them at Ukraine. It is an axis of convenience as well, because, of course, they have a shared interest in bringing down the West. And that's what we should really be concerned about. The fact that they have coalesced around this idea that the more damage you do to countries like the UK, Europe, North Atlantic area, the better it will be for all of them.
Yes, Vladimir Putin saying Russia is very grateful for China's help in trying to find a solution to the war in Ukraine. I mean, what is he talking about there? What is this, the way in which China is trying to help him with the war?
Well, Russia should be very grateful overall because, of course, it is Chinese tolerance and China actually supplying so much to Russia for its war machine that is actually allowing Russia to continue doing what it is. Now, that statement was about the so-called Chinese peace plan, this 12-point plan that China kind of came out with in the middle of last year, to proposing a kind of settlement for the Ukraine conflict. It's a bit of a misnomer. It's not really a peace plan. It's really how China feels about the war. And it's not all on Russia's side. It also calls for things like territorial integrity, respecting the UN Charter, safeguarding nuclear plants, preserving grain exports. So that is a direct criticism of what Russia was doing at the time. But yet, Putin is absolutely desperate for Chinese support to continue. So he's going to gloss over that, and he's going to pretend that everything continues to be rosy in that relationship between Moscow and Beijing.
And he's telling the world that together, China and Russia are upholding the principles of justice and a democratic world order. It's doublespeak, isn't it, really?
Well, as ever, you have to hold up a mirror and look at it. What is the exact reverse of what they're saying? And then it starts to make sense in exactly the same way that one of the justifications that Putin used for launching this full-scale invasion of Ukraine was that Russia had tried to preserve Ukrainian territorial integrity. It only makes sense if you look at it through the looking glass.
Wow. Well, what a concerning meeting of convenience and perhaps new axis that is being created of trade and cooperation between China and Russia. Keir Giles of Chatham House, thank you so much for talking us through it. I have to say,
Putin stands there saying, we uphold together justice and democracy, or the democratic world order.
I did mention that an African leader once offered food aid to the United Kingdom at the top of this hour.
I'd forgotten about that.
Yeah. I believe it was Idi Amin in the 1970s, who was, of course, running Uganda at the time. Sort of did it in a sarcastic way, but there we go.
That's very interesting. Yeah. I'll remember that for the next pub quiz.